So ask yourself honestly, are you constantly saying yes when every single fiber of your being is screaming no? Do you find yourself apologizing for things that clearly aren't your fault? Or maybe, you have this almost superhuman ability to feel someone else's mood shift before they even speak a single word, and you're already adjusting your own behavior to fix it. People probably commend you for this, right? They tell you you're so nice or so easy to be around.
But here is the reality we really need to confront today. What you're experiencing, it might not be kindness at all. Take a moment to let that sink in. This behavior, this constant, self-sacrificing agreeableness, might actually be a profound trauma response, and it has a specific, well-documented name in psychology that almost nobody talks about.
Section 1. The illusion of nice, when agreeability is a shield.
Okay, let's dive into this. We need to transition away from the everyday labels we give ourselves and start looking at the clinical reality of this behavior. When agreeability is functioning as a shield, we are no longer talking about mere politeness. We're talking about survival. Maybe you're the person who smooths things over before an argument can even spark. You're the one nodding and agreeing in a meeting when, internally, you completely disagree with the whole shebang. Or maybe you literally feel a flicker of panic in your chest at the mere thought of someone being upset with you. For years, you've probably labeled these actions as just being easygoing or hating drama. But psychologists, they have a very different term for this.
They call it fawning. Fawning is a survival strategy where one becomes excessively agreeable, helpful, or pleasant to appease a threat and ensure safety. It is entirely about safety. You aren't doing this because you just love being helpful. You're doing it because, at some point, your brain calculated that appeasing a threat was literally the only way to survive it. Once you truly understand where this comes from, so many of your past actions and exhausting relationships, for that matter, are going to start making a completely different kind of sense.
Section 2. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn. The fourth nervous system response.
To understand how this works, we need to look at the broader context of our nervous system. Specifically, how our bodies instinctively react to danger, especially during our incredibly vulnerable childhood years, when fighting back or running away simply isn't an option. You're likely very familiar with the first three: fight, flight, and freeze, the classic responses to danger. And this brilliantly illustrates the fourth one, first named by therapist Pete Walker, which is fawn. When you're a kid facing a threat, fighting back is usually impossible, and running away just isn't safe. So some people's nervous systems learn a brilliant, albeit costly, alternative strategy: become agreeable enough, pleasant enough, and helpful enough that the threat has no reason to escalate.
Now, I want to make something incredibly clear here. This is absolutely not a weakness, and it is not a personality trait. If you take away anything from this explainer today, let it be this. Your fawning is simply your nervous system making an early, automatic decision. It brilliantly decided that appeasing danger was way safer than confronting it or escaping it. It was a strategy that worked to protect you.
Section 3. Roots of anxious attachment. The psychology of safety.
So, where does this pattern actually take root? Let's shift our focus to the psychological origins of fawning, because it is deeply, deeply intertwined with the psychology of safety, and specifically something called anxious attachment. This pattern generally begins in childhood homes where love felt highly conditional, or where caregivers had wildly unpredictable moods. Imagine growing up in an environment that requires constant mood scanning. As a kid, you learn to read the tension in the room the second you walk through the door. You learn to adjust your behavior in advance to prevent an outburst. In a home where criticism, conflict, or a caregiver's sudden withdrawal of affection felt genuinely life-threatening to your developing brain, becoming perfectly agreeable wasn't just being nice. It was a highly logical, incredibly advanced way to secure your own safety.
This hyper-vigilant environment is the exact breeding ground for anxious attachment. This is an attachment style driven by an intense need for closeness, combined with a deep overriding fear of abandonment. Fawning and anxious attachment, they go hand in hand. When you're anxiously attached, your nervous system is constantly sounding an alarm that you're about to lose your connection to the people you rely on. So what do? You fawn to bridge the gap, practically erasing your own needs just to ensure the other person stays.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the profound distinction therapists make here. For the chronic fawner with anxious attachment, the fear driving the behavior has two layers. The superficial worry, the surface fear, is simply they might get angry. But the deep attachment fear, the terrifying foundational engine driving your nervous system into overdrive, is they might leave. It's not the anger you're managing. It's the underlying threat of total abandonment.
We also have to acknowledge a secondary psychological root here: disorganized attachment. This occurs when the caregiver is simultaneously the child's only source of comfort and their primary source of fear. It creates this impossible paradox for the brain. The real tragedy of both anxious and disorganized attachment is that over time, this fawning strategy becomes so deeply automatic that it stops being a conscious choice at all. It starts showing up decades later in totally safe environments, like in healthy relationships in normal workplaces, simply because their nervous system never got the memo that the original threat is gone.
Section 4. The hidden cost. The erosion of self.
But surviving this way comes with a heavy price. Fawning doesn't just cost you a few uncomfortable moments of being polite. Over the years, living in a constant state of fawning quietly erodes your sense of who you actually are. You say yes when you mean no. That leads to chronic exhaustion. Why? Because you've spent so long relentlessly tracking everyone else's needs and moods that your own needs become almost impossible to locate. You literally lose your identity. And naturally, this breeds a deep, unexplained resentment because you are constantly abandoning yourself just to keep others comfortable.
So the crucial point, and honestly the heartbreaking reality for the chronic fawner is this: liked by everyone and truly known by almost no one. You've curated a version of yourself that is perfectly agreeable to everyone you meet, but in doing so, you've completely hidden your true, authentic self away.
Section 5. Rebuilding your safety. The power of the pause.
So how do we break this cycle? We pivot toward rebuilding your safety, and it starts with something incredibly simple but profoundly difficult: teaching your body that it's safe to have boundaries now. But first, a major warning here. You cannot fix this by simply trying to be less nice. That framing misses the point entirely. If you just try to forcefully change your personality and act tough, you're usually just going to layer immense guilt right on top of your existing exhaustion. This isn't about being mean, it's about rebuilding a felt sense of safety in your own body.
Let's move to and see how this builds, starting very small, with practical, everyday application. Step 1. Just notice the urge to say yes before you've actually made a decision. Feel that automatic reflex kick in. Step 2. Pause, just for a single moment before answering. You don't even have to say no right away. You just have to prove to your nervous system that you are allowed to take up space and time to consider your own needs.
Beyond the pause, what truly helps is targeted therapy focused specifically on trauma or attachment. Now, it's important to note for accuracy that the Fawn response isn't a formal clinical diagnosis in the exact way PTSD or anxiety disorders are. However, these patterns are widely recognized by trauma-informed clinicians. They understand that this behavior is stored deep in your nervous system, not just in your conscious thinking. Therapy actually helps rewire that nervous system response.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final, provocative question to really reflect on. Was there a specific relationship where you first noticed yourself doing this? Think back. If this information resonated with you today, please remember this. You are not too nice, and you certainly aren't weak. Some incredibly resilient part of you simply learned, a long time ago, that fawning was the absolute safest way to stay connected. And now that you know the psychology behind it, you have the power to slowly, gently teach your nervous system that you are finally safe enough to be yourself.